Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Stephen Cole. Tensions were running high after police shot and killed a man accused of being a gangster in the London borough of Tottenham on Thursday. At first, there was a small and a reportedly calm protest by members of the man's family, but within hours the protests had escalated into arson, violence and mass looting. Parts of the borough in North London were left in ruins after crowds set fire to cars and buildings, and there were more disturbances on Sunday night, 8 kilometres away in Enfield, with shop windows smashed. More than 150 people have been arrested. Trouble then broke out in Brixton in South London. Later, the British police condemned a wave of, quote, copycat criminal activity right across the capital. The head of the British Interior Ministry, Theresa May, has come back from holiday to try and deal with the crisis after 2 consecutive nights of violence.
Don't you think it's about time? You've cut off so much blood supply to youths, right? Connections have stopped, yeah? The job that I'm working in now, I've only got this job up the road at Swinton Insurance, yeah? I only got that job because of connections. You cut off EMA, okay? You cut off so much stuff, right? There's a knock-on effect to everything, and look what's happened, right? The youths are running around, okay, stealing, yeah? Now they're looting and all this stuff. There's a reason for everything, Boris, okay? I'm thinking about the amount of time you are cutting and cutting and cutting, and then you're putting off youth fees. Okay, I've got so much friends who actually want to go to university, but have stopped, okay? You are spending, okay, hundreds of millions of pounds a week, okay, in Libya, when you could be over here. Sort yourselves out over here first.
Why do you think that all this started after the last Thursday's incident?
Because it's been building up, and the problem is the government have never ever really been in touch, and that's why that has reacted. And let's be honest, I'll tell you a quick story. 2 dogs died in a car that was owned by the police. They started an inquiry there and then. It was announced that's what they would do. They're suspending the officers that was involved. That's what they did. This guy that got shot, for whatever reason it was, nothing got said. They didn't even go and see the family. And that told everybody in this environment that we're nobody.
Do you think this is a movement of immigrants, or
this is a movement of the youth, the young people of today saying, guess what, mister? I've got no voice, no future, no leadership.
Marcus Dow, are you shocked by what you've seen there last night?
No, not at all. I have been living in London for 50 years. There are so many different moods and moments. But what I was certain about, listening to my grandson and my son, is that something very, very serious was going to take place in this country. Our political leaders had no idea. The police had no idea. But if you looked at young blacks and young whites with a discerning eye and a careful hearing, they have been telling us, and we would not listen, that what is happening in this country to them.
Mr. Howe, if I can just stop you, Mr. Howe, for a moment. You say you're not shocked. Does this mean that you condone what happened in your community last night?
I condone, of course not. What I'm going to condone it for, what I'm concerned about more than anything else, there is a young man called Mark Duggan. He has parents, he has brothers, he has sisters, and few yards away from where he lives, a police officer blew his head off.
Well, Mr. Howe, we have to.
Let me finish.
Mr. Howe, we have to wait for the official inquiry before we can say things like that. We don't know what happened to Mr. Duggan. We are going to wait for the police report on it. If I can take you on a little bit, you were talking about your grandson. You were talking about young people. You were talking about your grandson. You were talking
young people. They have been stopping and searching young blacks for no reason at all. I have a grandson, he's an angel, and he began to think he was coming of age when the police slapped him up against the wall and searched him, and he thought he had now had a gold star. I asked him the other day, apropos of a sense that something was going seriously wrong in this country. I said, how many times have the police searched you? He said, Papa, I can't count. There's so many times. Mr.
Howe, that may well have happened, and if you say it did, I am not to gainsay you, but that is not an excuse to go out rioting and cause the sort of damage that we have been seeing over the last few days.
Where were you in 1981 in Brixton?
Mr.
I don't call it rioting, I call it an insurrection of the masses of the people. It is happening in Syria, it is happening in Clapham, it's happening in Liverpool, it's happening in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and that is the nature of the historical moment.
Mr. Howe, Mr. Howe, if I can just ask you, you are not a stranger to riots yourself, I understand, are you? You have taken part in them yourself.
I have never taken part in a single riot. I've been on demonstrations that ended up in a conflict, and have some respect for an old West Indian Negro and stop accusing me of being a rioter. Because you won't tickle me to get abusive. You just sound idiotic. Have some respect.
Darcus Howe.
Grandchildren.
Thank you very much for joining us from Croydon. Darcus Howe, their writer and broadcaster.
Look in the newspaper. How is it in the newspaper? And I'm telling you all this now. I was down there last night, and it weren't just black people. Right? It weren't just black people. You look in the friggin' newspaper, what do you see? Black people. Black people. Right? Even a white lady came up to me and she opened up the newspaper and showed 5 policemen on one guy. And they were holding his head like that, holding him up like that.
But it wasn't intercommunal violence. This is where he was completely wrong. What's happened is that a substantial section of the chavs that you wrote about have become black. The whites have become black. A particular sort of violent, destructive, nihilistic gangster culture has become the fashion. And black and white, boy and girl, operate in this language together. This language which is wholly false, which is a Jamaican patois that's been intruded in England. And this is why so many of us have this sense of literally a foreign country.
Now, excuse me, utterly outrageous, obviously, what you're saying. What you're doing is you're equating black culture with criminality and you are. Let me finish. No, and you said.
Just let Owen Jones
me finish.
Because I'm not trying to condone what happened during the riots. It disgusted me, made me sick, but it saddened me more than anything, because those kids that was rioting and looting, they've just made life 10 times harder for themselves. The word chav, which in the video I state stands for council house and violent. This is a derogatory term used again by certain sectors of Middle England to define people from poor and unfortunate backgrounds that have less money than them, that haven't had as good an education. And for me, that term is no different from similar terms used to be derogatory towards race and sex. The only difference being that the word chav is used very publicly in the press. And, you know, if similar terms to do with race or sex were used that publicly in the papers, there'd be public outcry, and rightly so. When you attack someone because of the way they talk, or the way they dress, the music they listen to, or their lack of education, and you do it publicly and it's acceptable to do that, you make them feel alienated. They don't feel like a part of society. So, you know, anyone kind of beaten into that apathy won't care about society because they feel in their eyes society has made it very clear they don't care about them. And when the riots kicked off, there was a lot of opportunities